Tonight, violence, arrests, and student expulsions. The latest on anti-Israel campus protests. And
bringing your loved ones home is at the heart of everything we're trying to do.
as the fight to free hostages carries on, we hear firsthand from the aunt of a young girl freed from captivity.
When she got home, her parents, who were both murdered on October 7th by Hamas terrorists, were not there to greet her.
Plus, the election year fight to secure the southern border. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Campus chaos as some schools move to crack down on anti-Israel protests. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Tara Mergener.
And from the CBN studio in our Washington News Bureau, I'm John Jessup. Well, after weeks of unrest at Columbia University, tonight police have restored order on the New York City campus after police moved in to remove students who ignored demands to vacate a classroom building.
But even as calm came to Columbia, around the country, there are growing conflicts among protesters. Dale Hurd joins us now. Dale, we understand Columbia and other campus riots. While students are among those demonstrating, there are also reports of outside agitators, right?
That's right, Sarah. John, New York City Mayor Eric Adams warned today at a press conference that there is a, quote, global movement to radicalize young people, unquote, by outsiders who he termed professionals, and said he would not allow that to happen in his city.
This is a global problem that young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children, and I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York.
Hundreds of New York City police officers moved in last night after protesters took over Hamilton Hall at Columbia University, prompting Columbia's president to request the police help, saying the protest had become a clear and present danger to the university. As many as 170 people were arrested. There were clashes with police overnight also at UCLA, the University of Arizona, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Today, Republican senators addressed the issue. The finding of outside agitation was echoed by Republican Senator John Cornyn and others at a Capitol Hill presser today.
Yesterday, the University of Texas in Austin announced that nearly half of those arrested on Monday had no affiliation with the University of Texas. What they did find when they arrested some of these outside agitators was guns, mallets, and other weapons that were confiscated by law enforcement.
John Kennedy said the White House could have ended these protests sooner simply by threatening to yank federal funding from the universities.
President Biden could stop this stuff on a dime. President Biden is scared to death to alienate the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip held a demonstration today expressing their gratitude to American college students for the anti-Israel protest. Jewish students on these campuses have been hit with a wave of anti-Semitic hate. Today on Capitol Hill, House lawmakers debated the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. It would mandate that federal anti-discrimination laws in education use the definition of anti-Semitism put forward by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Supporters of the legislation say it will help combat anti-Semitism on college campuses, but opponents say it goes too far, and the ACLU has urged Congress to reject the bill. John, Tara.
All right, CBN's Dale Hurd. Thank you so much, Dale. Well, the Biden administration is sending a clear message to Hamas. A ceasefire deal only will come if the terror group releases the hostages.
That's right, and a point driven home today during a meeting between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Israel's president.
We yearn for the immediate return of the hostages. It is and should be the top priority of the international community.
We're determined to get a ceasefire that brings the hostages home. And to get it now. And the only reason that that wouldn't be achieved is because of Hamas. There is a proposal on the table, and as we've said, no delays, no excuses. The time is now, and the time is now long past due to bring the hostages home to their families.
And as negotiations continue, so do Israeli plans for a full-scale invasion of Rafah. Despite White House pushback, IDF officials believe the southern Gaza operation is essential to defeating Hamas, securing the border and rescuing the hostages.
Well, 4-year-old Abigail Adan was the first American hostage released by Hamas. She, along with her neighbors, was captured after hiding in a safe room. Her brother and sister hid for 14 hours in a closet and survived.
Tragically, her parents, though, did not. And now, more than 6 months since the ordeal began, today we sat down with Abigail's great aunt, Liz Neftali, to discuss the aftermath of Israel's ongoing war against Hamas, including what's happening right here at home. I want to ask first, what is your reaction to these protests really sweeping the nation and all these universities and the calls to divest funding from Israel? What are your thoughts on that?
I believe everyone has a right to protest. But what I also really want people to understand is that on October 7th, there was a massacre. There was a terrorist massacre that took place in Israel. My niece, an American, was murdered that day. Her husband was murdered. Their 3 children, a 3-year-old, a 6, and a 9-year-old, witnessed the murder of their parents. And the reason I say this is because while people have a right to protest and people have a right, we need to keep what actually happened on October 7th for people to understand why all of this is where we are right now. And it started with 3,000 terrorists coming into Israel. So my great niece, Abigail, who was a 3-year-old at that time and survived in her father's arms when he was murdered and crawled out from underneath his body. She was then taken hostage for 51 days by 15 Hamas terrorists, took them across the border. So when you ask me about the protests, people can protest. You ask about the divestment, I'm not an expert. But what I am is a humanitarian diplomat, so to speak, which says no matter what they want to say on the campuses, the truth of what happened on October 7th, to me, is something that we need to keep in our minds as what really started all of this.
Liz, polls show overwhelming support for Israel over Hamas, but it wanes significantly among younger Americans. How concerned are you about the generational shift and what that might mean for the future of Israel?
First, Hamas is a terrorist organization. There's no place for terrorism, just like there's no place for a child to be a hostage or a child to die in a war. There's just no place for that. You know, in New York City, there is an exhibit with the Nova Music Festival downtown. And I know that there were some protesters. They came in, they saw what this exhibit was representing, which was the mass murder of over 300 young people dancing at a freedom evening in morning. They left and they said sorry, and they went home. So I think when you ask that question about where we're going to go, I hope that really the piece that becomes really important that these universities will help to make possible and communities will is that communication, because we're not talking.
A question for you. The White House is debating and redefining potentially what anti-Semitism is. In your mind, is there a difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Israel, or in your mind, is it all the same thing?
Why I'm here as a hostage member, family member, it isn't about anti-Semitism, it isn't about anti-Zionism, and I go back to this, it's just about hate. And right now we have 8 Americans, we have 133 people from 17 nations that were all kidnapped. And I will just add one piece, which is that last week there was a statement that came out from these 17 nations. And what this tells me and tells us is that this is a united effort to bring home these hostages.
We also spoke with Liz about Abigail's recent meeting with President Biden and her work to free the remaining hostages. We'll bring you the rest of that conversation later in today's program. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. The United Methodist Church has lifted a ban on gay clergy members now. At their annual conference today, denomination leaders approved the move, one that progressive congregations have long been pushing for.
If you are gay or a lesbian or otherwise queer, you should be free to come out and still acknowledge that God can place a call on your life.
Not all UMC churches agree on more liberal LGBTQ inclusion, causing a split in the denominations. In the last 5 years, about a quarter of churches have left the UMC.
Well, it's official. Abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy are now illegal in Florida. A controversial measure banning the procedure went into effect today. There are limited exceptions for the life of the mother or baby, also exceptions for rape, incest, and human trafficking victims, but only through 15 weeks of pregnancy. Ultimately, Florida voters will decide the future of abortions in the state with a ballot initiative this November.
Well, conservative House Republicans are pushing forward with their effort to oust Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene announcing today she is moving the motion to the floor.
I think every member of Congress needs to take that vote and let the chips fall where they may. And so next week, I am going to be calling this motion to vacate. Absolutely calling it. I can't wait to see Democrats go out and support a Republican speaker and have to go home to their primaries.
And like the Congresswoman mentioned, a number of Democrats have pledged to support Johnson, a move offering the speaker some job security, at least for now.
Well, call in the National Guard. That's the message New Mexico Republicans have for Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham after seeing firsthand what they describe as weaknesses at the southern border. They're calling on the Democratic governor to follow the lead of other border states like Texas and Arizona to mobilize the National Guard for reinforcement. The move comes in a divisive election year where immigration is a leading issue for Americans. A new Gallup poll found that voters in April named immigration as their top concern for the third straight month.
All right, and with that, let's bring in Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. Welcome, Congresswoman. You are part of a group of 5 Democrats who are calling on President Biden to use his authority to remove migrants more quickly. And what is it about this issue that has you taking a stand right now?
Well, I'm pushing the president to do what he's refused to do, which is secure the southern border. I think we've seen a lot of posturing around immigration and border security, and you see both sides trying to get a piece of legislation that is perfect and refusing to act on what is actionable and what most of us agree on, which is securing the southern border, defunding violent cartels, and stopping the flow of fentanyl. I own an auto repair and a machine shop with my husband. That was my life before being elected here, and rural communities like mine have been hollowed out by fentanyl. It is our coworkers, our neighbors, our friends who are overdosing and dying in their cars or at work, and we won't stand for it. So securing the border is a critical part. You can't have national security without border security.
I know you sponsored legislation in the House. The bipartisan effort in the Senate failed. You have said that the United States does not have operational control of the southern border. Recent reporting suggests, so, that the president is considering executive action. Was he wrong to let Title 42 expire? And what specifically would you like to see get done?
Right. I think that the Supreme Court needs to, Congress needs to act to reinstate presidential authority under Title 42. And I believe the president needs to exercise his authority to reinstate Remain in Mexico. These are policies that our Border Patrol is demanding, asking for, and my communities are demanding. I think we want to stem the flow of fentanyl that's hollowing us out. And, we've seen a lack of commitment. I think that there's been a real visceral reaction to the scenes of chaos at the border, but there has not been the same attention to what it's like to live in a country or a government that's controlled by cartels. And I believe that a fuller picture of humanitarianism would be enforcing these policies that would stop the flow of fentanyl and human trafficking and defund the cartels, not just in Mexico, but around the world.
There was a push to address the border as part of foreign aid, and now that has passed. What are the chances, for a deal at this point?
Well, I can't control the incentives or priorities of my colleagues. What I can do is represent my community and our priorities. So I will be working as hard as I can to find a that Venn diagram of agreement where we can move forward and improve life and security for normal Americans.
The House voted today on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. The vote faced some backlash from members of your caucus who say it's divisive. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we actually already voted, and I supported this as part of an amendment process several months ago. So this is not necessarily a new issue that we're seeing come before Congress. I think that when you are having discussions about policy, it's important to have definitions around terms. The definition doesn't have to be perfect, but to have just a framework that we're working with to discuss an issue is useful.
And Marie, quickly, yes or no, will you be backing Speaker Johnson in the next motion to vacate vote?
Yeah, I mean, Johnson has represented a lot of courage. He brought funding to Ukrainians that were dying under a bloodthirsty tyrant. Putin invaded a democratically elected nation, and giving them the lethal means to defend themselves demonstrated a lot of courage. I was grateful for the Southern Baptist Convention to come out in support of that. A lot of my Ukrainian friends are Southern Baptist, and it's important that we're representing the values there.
All right, Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, thank you so much for your time, being so gracious and being with us with your insights tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right, from the horrors of October 7th to the healing that has happened since. More with Liz Neftali when Faith Nation returns. Nearly 7 months into Israel's war with Hamas, the fight to free hostages continues.
Here now is the second half of our interview with Liz Neftali, the great aunt of the first American hostage freed from Gaza, 4-year-old Abigail Edan. Last week, Liz, Abigail was at the White House where she met with the president. He tweeted, or actually posted, a photo saying, "I will not rest until every hostage like Abigail, ripped from their families and held by Hamas, is in the arms of their loved ones." Can you tell us about what that meeting was like? And also, I know that she's been through a lot, the family has been through a lot. How is Abigail and her siblings?
Abigail and her siblings are, children from the age of 4 till 12. One of the things that we'll never know in advance is what the effects are on these children. And there's thousands of children in Israel that have been affected by October 7th. Keep that in mind. But I will say that one of the parts about being at the White House was they were able to create a memory that was beautiful. Because most of the memories of the last 7 months have been really horrific and traumatic. And I look at Abigail as a miracle, but I also look at it and say, this was led by President Biden and many people in the administration. And I think about, for 51 days, she was silenced. She had to cry in silence. She had to laugh in silence. She couldn't speak out loud. And here in the Oval Office and in the White House, she was allowed to be a child.
Still so hard to process. As you know, there are families who have been protesting the Netanyahu government, saying that instead of fighting Hamas, he should be prioritizing the hostages. What say you?
So as a family member, I try to be very careful that we don't attack, because we're trying to come together. The more we come together. And I think that the people of Israel has spoken out. The rallies are consistently very large, and they are demanding, and we have demanded, hostages be released. That needs to be the most important piece, because the minute hostages are released, not only can the fighting stop, and I talk about just for Israel for a moment, but the Israeli nation needs to heal. And for them to heal with what happened to them on October 7th, they must have these people, these children, these women, these mothers, these fathers, these grandparents come home. So the other part that I understand, and again, not as a diplomat, but just from being in this process, is that currently there is a deal on the table. And what we understand is that currently it isn't Netanyahu who is currently an impediment, it is Hamas.
We only have a few seconds left. I know you have been working with other members of the hostage families. What can people do to support you and those who either are waiting for their loved ones to return home or those who just continue to grieve? Just a few seconds.
So I think it's two things. Tell our stories. Keep telling the truth of what happened on October 7th, because that is something that is all of our obligation. We all have truths of history, of our races, of our religions, but right now, the truth of what happened on October 7th is really important. And then I'm going to say this, which is, obviously people can reach out to their leaders, they can do a lot of things, but what we also need are prayers. We need people to believe in the power of bringing home these hostages. And I don't take it lightly that people's prayers helped to bring Abigail home. I don't take it lightly that people's prayers helped to bring 109 people home, both the hostages and their family members that are in Israel and around the world. They need the love and support of people who are dedicated to helping bring home these hostages.
Yes. We had a chance to speak even longer with Liz. Regrettably, we couldn't bring you all of that tonight. For an extended version of our interview, visit the CBN News YouTube page.
All right, powerful stuff. Coming up, a cat's love of cardboard takes her on an unexpected journey. Next on Faith Nation. All right, finally tonight, letting the cat out of the bag normally is not a good thing.
Normally it's not, but in this Utah couple's case, it was worth celebrating. Galena the cat disappeared from her home in Utah last month. Her devastated owners did everything to track her down, including flyers and Facebook posts, but to no avail. Nearly a week later, Galena's family received some good news. The cat's microchip had been scanned over 600 miles away in California. An Amazon employee found her in a box along with steel-toed boots that had been returned to an Amazon warehouse. Galena survived 6 days in a cardboard box without food or water. Thankfully, she was discovered in relatively good shape and quickly reunited with her owners, who called the positive ending a miracle. Talk about a cat with 9 lives.
I have so many questions about this story.
You want to know more about the steel-toed boots,
I
right?
do. How does that fit in?
Thanks for watching.
See you tomorrow.